Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Battlefield Next. My name is Major Jason Coffey. Before we get started with this episode, let's do some housekeeping. First, the views expressed on the podcast are the views of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School, the Army, the Department of Defense, or any other agency of the U.S. government. Today's podcast is an interview of 3 recent graduates of the Judge Advocate Officer Basic Course: First Lieutenant Briana Kolota, First Lieutenant Asia Bus, and First Lieutenant Mandi Ford. Due to the episode's length, it is divided into 2 parts. In part 1, Major Wellemeyer and I discuss with them such topics as why they chose the Army JAG Corps, their commissioning sources, JAG Corps internships, their experiences with the application, accession, and assignments process, and preparing for and reporting to the Direct Commission Officer course. Part 2 covers their experiences at the Direct Commission Officer course, the Judge Advocate Officer Basic Course, the advice they would give future applicants, and what they think the JAG Corps can do to improve the application and accession process. So, without further delay, we move to the episode.
All right, Lieutenant Bus, if you could tell us a little bit about what your decision-making process was like to choose the JAG Corps, given that you were an ROTC ed delay student.
Sure, sir. So I actually started looking at the JAG Corps when I was in high school. I got the opportunity to work in an office throughout high school. In college, I decided to join ROTC and got the chance to talk to a lot of JAG officers, and just it reaffirmed my my desire to become a judge advocate.
First Lieutenant Kolota, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to do ROTC while you were in law school?
So it was definitely a balancing act, I guess is what you could call it. I had wonderful support both from the law school and cadre at the University of Florida Army ROTC program. So it was just figuring out the schedule, making sure that I wasn't missing large chunks of, instruction at the ROTC side, making sure I was still being able to fully participate in law school and, not fall behind there. It's definitely doable, though. Like, if someone really wants to do it, I think they should just go for it. It very much gets you in that mindset of doing both professions at the same time. So I'm very grateful for that experience of, learning how to be an officer and learning how to be, a law student and a future lawyer at the same time, because it is very similar to what our routine and our lifestyle is here at DCC and OBC.
Could you talk a little bit about what your training was like during the summers after your 1L and 2L year?
Sure. So I decided to do ROTC my first year of law school. After my first year of law school, I went to the basic camp. That's what it was called at the time, which is just a very basic introduction to, what ROTC is going to be like and being an officer candidate. And it was a month long at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Very similar to DCC. And then after my second year of law school, I went to the advanced camp is what it was called. And that was just your capstone project, basically a month long at Fort Knox as a cadet. And you rotate through different leadership positions, and you do, we did like 2 weeks of field training, in addition to, some other administrative things that you need to commission. But all of that summer training was worked out, between the law school, JARO, and ROTC, so that I was still able to do the internship with the JAG Corps and summer training at the same time for ROTC.
As a cadet doing ROTC in law school, were you guaranteed a spot in the JAG Corps, or did you still have to apply just like everybody else?
So I was never guaranteed a spot in the JAG Corps. That was very obvious up front. That was never like a hide the ball situation. As soon as I was interested in contracting, the recruiting officer told me, hey, it's not guaranteed. You might have to choose a different branch, but I was okay with that because I wanted to serve in some way. And in the end, I worked as hard as I could just to make myself a good candidate for the JAG Corps. And, if you're doing everything you can, it gives you a better shot. Gives you a good idea of what the lifestyle is like. So, it's not guaranteed, but it's, obvious that you want it if you really put the work in.
Lieutenant Buss, I'm going to go back to you and ask you a question about your decision, your branching decision. So as an ROTC student in undergrad, you had a number of different options. What was your decision-making process like to decide to apply for ed delay and go that route instead of some of the other branches?
Throughout ROTC, we were given the chance to not really intern, but there's a program called CTLT. We were allowed to shadow XOs, shadow platoon leaders. So that kind of really opened my eyes to, I would say, the real Army life. Coming back from that and looking at the branch choices, I made a preference list because, like Lieutenant Kolota said, we aren't guaranteed an ed delay to get the JAG Corps. So I chose the Medical Corps branch. And then next was aviation. I just kind of chose those as aspirations in case the JAG Corps didn't work out. Luckily it has, but like Lieutenant Kolota said, the JAG Corps is not guaranteed throughout law school, so we do have to keep that in mind.
All right, Lieutenant Ford, now I want to ask you a question about your decision. So you are what's called a direct commissionee, which means that you applied to be in the JAG Corps as a regular civilian in law school. Could you tell us a little bit about your decision-making process as a law student to decide to apply for and then commission into the JAG Corps?
Sure, sir. Well, for me, it was simple because I had intended to enlist in the military after getting my undergraduate degree, but it didn't work out. So once I got to law school and the field screening officers from all of the branches started coming every semester, twice a year and giving their presentations, it was a no-brainer for me. It was another route for me to get into the military, and billable hours sounded horrible, and I craved that sense of adventure that you're just generally not going to get from any other law firm out there.
Earlier, Lieutenant Kolota mentioned the internship. Could you talk a little bit about your experience in the internship program?
Absolutely, sir, because it's been 2.5 years, and I still get heart flutters when I think about my internship. I actually got to go to Italy for my internship, and that's where I first got my feet wet in the Army culture. I got to rotate through two different areas of law, and I got to attend a lot of different meetings that related to different areas of law. It was 2 months. It ran from May to, I think, the end of July. So yeah.
For someone who might be interested in the internship, could you talk a little bit about what maybe the physical requirements were, if there were any, and kind of what a typical schedule was like for you while you were at that unit?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. It was typically a 9 to 5 schedule. PT was about 3 days a week. We did a lot of fun activities. Usually one day of week was dedicated to the unofficial sport of the JAG Corps, Ultimate Frisbee. So we had that at least once a week, and we went on bike rides all throughout the side streets of Italy. We went on runs. We did ultimate soccer. We had 3 soccer balls going once. It was a lot of fun. They mixed it up almost every day. It was something different.
You mentioned that you were exposed to at least two different areas of law during your internship. Could you talk a little bit more about what those areas were?
Yes, sir. The first month I spent in military justice on the government side, or military justice, yeah. So it was the government side of the courtroom, and I got to attend 2 courts martial. I got to, the second month, it was legal assistance. And I got to sit in on a lot of interviews with soldiers just dealing with their day-to-day issues, such as wills and divorces. Since it was Italy, there were some immigration issues that came up. And actually, the tax clinic was there too, so I got to learn a little bit about that as well.
What was the rank of the individuals that you spent the most time with?
We had some first lieutenants who had just gotten there, but mostly captains, sir.
So you think it's fair to say that it was a good representation of what you'll be doing soon when you're in the JAG Corps?
Absolutely, sir.
You get to your
That's
duty
what
station?
yeah. Now, since being here, I've heard that I'll be a first lieutenant myself, and I'll be around a bunch of captains mostly.
And what are you actually going to be doing next?
I'm actually going to legal assistance.
All right, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the application process. I think one of you earlier had mentioned a field screening officer. Lieutenant Kolota, let's go to you. Could you talk a little bit about what the interview process was like with your field screening officer, and also maybe touch on the application and what you needed to submit with that?
Sure. So the interview process was we were given information about when the field screening officer would be at my law school, and we scheduled our own interview with the field screening officer. Sometimes the career development office or some type of office like that will set up time slots, but I contacted him individually, and I dressed up, wore a suit. Since I was a cadet, I didn't wear my uniform, but I know like Lieutenant Buss did wear her uniform. So once we was in the interview, for me it was very laid back, just because they knew I was a cadet, and I had already contracted to serve at that point. So it wasn't, the questions for me weren't, are you willing to deploy? Are you willing to move where the military tells you to? It was more of just like, hey, what do you want to know about the job? What are you interested in? They gave me some suggestions on classes to take in my last year and a half of law school. And honestly, I'm very glad that I took those classes because they have been immensely helpful. Administrative law. I took immigration law. We didn't have any like national security type law, but if you can take that I can see how that would be extremely helpful. But then, the interview was, I want to say maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And once that was done, I believe the field screening officer submits their own review of the interview and their own recommendation. And then I went online. I think I filled out the application after my interview, and just had a personal statement, some pretty basic questions. It didn't take very long. The longest part is probably the personal statement. And once you submit that, I believe it's usually around October, if not a little bit earlier. And then you receive the results in December.
Lieutenant Buss, if you could talk a little bit about maybe other judge advocates or people that you consulted after your field screening officer during that process with your decision to go further along while you were in law school.
So, sir, I really clung on to the people that I met at my internship. Captain Rachel Arment, she was a really good mentor for me. And just like Lieutenant Ford said, the people you work with at the internships are more aligned with your peers and the kind of people you'll be working with in the Judge Advocate Corps when you first enter. So she really talked me through the process. There was times where I was nervous or times where I just wanted someone to look over something, for example, the letter to my FSO. So having those links to the JAG Corps and having someone who really knows what they're talking about was super helpful during the process.
I'm going to skip ahead until the acceptance, until commissioning. So, Lieutenant Buss, about how long before you were accepted were you actually coming to the JAG Corps report for DCC?
So there was a bit of a delay from acceptance into actually coming to Fort Benning, Georgia. So during that time, it was about a 6-month to 8-month delay. So during that time, I found other employment while waiting to enter DCC.
And how was the medical process for you?
So I actually did the long-term Army physical during ROTC. So as an ed delay, I didn't have to renew that long process, thank goodness. I just had to fill out an LHI form, do a PHA for the Army, just an updated physical, and send it in to the Army.
And Lieutenant Ford, and what was that process for doing your own medical process?
Sure. So you first have to, the Army will give you a list of providers in your area that you go to. They just do a basic medical assessment of you. And you have to go and get some other tests done as well. So after you do all of that work yourself, for the direct commissioning side anyway, then you have to submit it all to DODMERB. DODMERB goes through your entire medical file and looks to see if you're going to require a waiver or not. And regardless of whether you require a waiver, they send all of your medical information to the command surgeon, and they make the ultimate determination whether or not you're clear. So it's a two-phase process that takes a very, very long time.
And Lieutenant Kolota, I'm going to skip ahead to the duty station process. So you've obviously know where you're going next, right?
I do. I am going to Fort Bliss in Texas.
And how did that work out for you? Were you given a number of places to choose from? What was the conversation with PP and TO like?
So JARO sent out an email. It was early May, I believe, stating that we needed to put in our preference list. And they had a list of locations, and we chose 8, ranked 1 through 8, 1 being your top choice. Fort Bliss was my second choice because I had interned there. I put it higher, and I got my second choice. So I was very happy with the process overall. I believe we submitted the form at the end of May, and we found out a month later, and we received a call from JARO, personally, each of us, stating, this is going to be your duty station. If you have any questions, let us know. It was very personal. No issues.
Lieutenant Buss, you're going to Fort Bragg.
Yes, sir.
What are you going to be doing there?
I will be in legal assistance, sir, at 18th Airborne Corps.
And where was Fort Bragg on your wish list?
Fort Bragg was number 1, so I was very excited to hear that I'd be going to Fort Bragg.
And so now I'm going to skip ahead to preparing for DCC. So for the two, Ed DeLay and then Lieutenant Kolota, you went through ROTC and law school. You kind of had a taste of what, what training, this kind of training was going to be like. So I'm going to focus this question to Lieutenant Ford. Lieutenant Ford, how was it preparing for DCC specifically, taking care of getting, putting your household goods up in storage, getting ID cards? What was the process for you?
Sure, sir. The household goods, really it only took one phone call to the right person. And that gal, she actually works here at the JAG school. She's very, very helpful. I sent her, I just sent her one email, and she responded back. I sent her an email asking, what's the process? I don't know what to do, because I had to get my stuff out of storage before I even left for DCC. And I sent her one email, and she responded back with all of the information I needed and helped me fill out this online application, because it's all online. I just got stuck at step 1. And so that part was actually very simple. You just fill out an application online saying where you're going, where you're from. You have to submit your orders and set up an appointment. Someone comes out and looks at all of your stuff to see how long it's going to take for them to move it. But thankfully, my grandmother handled that because I was actually already in training when that happened. So that part was easy. ID cards, I didn't know enough about the process to even get one beforehand, so I had to wait till we got to DCC. And once I got to DCC, I didn't get it for 3 weeks. That really holds you up because you need your ID card to do a lot of business there on post.
So what was that like? So you find out you've been accepted to the JAG Corps. You get orders to show up to Fort Benning. What's it like when you show up at Fort Benning?
Well, sir, it was terrifying for me because first of all, it's like 90 degrees out. I wasn't used to that kind of humidity. I dressed up pretty fancy, and then when I got there, I saw other people wearing shorts and a t-shirt, so I felt out of place. I didn't know where to go. It was a big installation, but once I checked in at the visitor center, someone there squared me away, told me how to get to the meeting point. But really, I just found 2 others who didn't know what they were doing either, and just stuck with that group for that very first initial meeting, because I didn't even know how to talk to anyone in a uniform yet, so I just kind of stood there.
What kind of work did you do to prepare yourself for physical fitness, the physical fitness requirements in the Army?
I knew that we were going to be doing push-ups, sit-ups, and the run. That's a standard fitness test at this point. So I, about 2 months prior to coming into DCC, I just started doing push-ups, sit-ups, and running. Apart from that, I was not a very athletic person, but I focused on that for that short period of time, and it got me to where I needed to be when I got here. I started running a little bit in law school, but not much.
And did you do any other things for any other preparation to get ready for DCC?
I actually did join CrossFit for about a month because I knew that I was going to have to deadlift just to even take the OPAT. The OPAT you have to pass before you can actually get in to start class. And part of the OPAT testing is the deadlift, and the minimum was 120 pounds, and I could not even deadlift 120 pounds. So I joined CrossFit for a month, and it got me to where I needed to be within 3 weeks. And I'm sure it helped in other ways that I didn't know.
This concludes part 1 of episode 4. To continue listening, please click on part 2 of episode 4.